mentor sessions material here. We had planned a series of mentor sessions, and we're hoping to get some feedback from the participants about what will be useful in like future sessions. And when you're speaking with others in the community, if you hear anything, please feel free to email us or reach out to us or phone us about topics that you would find useful as a mentor. The session overview, some welcome and introductions, and we've done a little bit of that informally, and we'll hear from John in a moment. Just a little bit about the vision for the mentor sessions, some things that are important to know and what's new for this season. Then looking at the FRC season in a nutshell, and maybe from the perspective of a teacher dealing with the pandemic and the regulations that go along with the pandemic. And mentor tips, especially for those mentors who are now taking on new roles. Maybe we can support each other with some plans to handle the season with style. And future sessions, we'll see what happens after that. So we have on the call here, John Hobbins, who is the director of FIRST Canada with a long history and a storied history in the FRC and FIRST organization. And he was my first contact in the world of robotics in FRC about in 2015. And it's been really a privilege to work along with John during that time. As you may know now, my name is William Neal. I started in FIRST in 2015 while I was running a STEM program at my previous school. And we had such a lot of fun that the team kept on coming back and recommending students for the next year. And after 1 year, 30 students showed up on the first day of school and signed up for the team even before we announced it. So that was a good sign. And that really transformed my career and my classroom and my extracurriculars and my entire life. It was a really, really beneficial sort of several years at my school. And yeah, it's been the most amazing time. And it's also been a privilege to hear from our three mentors who are present so far this evening, and really happy to have you here with us. The vision for the mentor sessions, as has been mentioned, it's a space for the members of the FRC community to powerfully support each other, for us to introduce new members to the mentoring process, offer tips and points of learning between the mentors, what we call sharing best practices from the world of education, I suppose, and developing capacity in our FRC community. And we will, just checking coming up here, I think this is a very good point at which to hear from John. I've got the next two slides, important to know and new this season. And I wonder if John might like to comment from his perspective, some of the most important points to know this season and or new developments. So welcome, John, and very happy to have you here on the call.
Thanks, William. Hi, everyone. It's always good to be here. And I have an open agenda tonight. So following the script that William has put before us, but at the same time, creating an opportunity for a short amount of open talk. So instead of me talking at you, it's an opportunity for you to ask myself or William some questions. And just before we get into that, I'd like to say that I wanted to extend a warm welcome to William, to our team here at FIRST Canada. William will be heavily focused on FRC duties and supporting all the great work around FRC and supporting me with the task that I have to help me do a better job with everything that we do with FIRST in our community. I'd like to first of all just ask you how you're doing and anything particular that you want to share with us with the situations with your team at the moment. If we could just go around to the attendees and give them an opportunity, William, to introduce themselves, say where they're from, and to tell us how positive things are right now with their teams.
Sure. And we've had a little chance to informally get some introductions going. So maybe we could go around and you could add a few details onto your introductions. And on my screen, the first I see is a beer. So maybe we can hear from a beer and let us know how things are going down the road in London, Ontario.
All right. To be honest, I was off last year, and so everything changed this year. And so I did not start announcing that we have a robotics club or a team until a week or two ago, and then so kids started signing up, and we ended like they signed up until Friday. We had our first meeting at lunch today. We also had to go through, vaccination receipts, and so half the kids still didn't show their vaccination receipts, and so I couldn't let them into the meeting today, which was really sad. Like I just couldn't let them in. Rules are rules. And so if they couldn't show me a vaccination receipt showing that they've had their 2 doses, then they couldn't come into the meeting. We only had half the kids come in. I had mentioned earlier that we're worried to pay our 7,500 or whatever the amount is, and then if one of our team members gets sick, we're a small school and we'll be a small team, so coming up with the money is not easy for us, and so we're worried to pay the amount, and then if something happens or we have a school closure, or if one of our team members gets sick or one of our mentors and we all have to self-isolate, say during build season, then we just can't really do anything about that, and then we'd lose most of the money. So that was really our conversation and our concern. We talked about like just we're still going to run the robotics club and meets every week, and then attend those virtual like training sessions and everything. So we have all that, but I was just saying that I wasn't sure if we're going to actually register, which is really sad. So, but it's good that we have until, I think, what do you say, January 8th?
January 8th.
Well,
Yeah.
we could register and then we have up until then to cancel or something.
Indeed, and that should hopefully help with the planning. So, well, thank you, Abir, and we're really happy to work with your school and many other schools who are in the same situation. And we're quite aware of the challenge to work around COVID regulations multiplied by school board bureaucracy, and that's not an easy thing. And in anticipation of that, I think you'll find that FRC, or First Canada, has been putting several contingencies into place to help teams that are finding those challenges. And I think we'll come back to that. Maybe let's hear from Bill.
Hi, yeah. I have been a mentor for 2 teams up until this year, and I'm head mentor now for Bracebridge. Bracebridge Muskoka Lake Secondary School is a small school of about 800 people in Muskoka. And our board, the Trillium Lakeland District School Board, has a different policy for vaccinations, in that we're not to ask students about their vaccination status. When it became clear to me that FRC would require vaccines, I felt somewhat relieved that being vaccinated, myself as all the teachers have to be vaccinated, that would help. But we have to offer extracurriculars to everyone at the school without making that inquiry. And so it's a little, we are very careful at our meetings, and we haven't begun our robot meetings yet. And I'm also a coach for another extracurricular, and it's been very difficult to encourage other teachers and coaches to come out. And fortunately this year, I think that mostly to rally around Ian, I've had quite a lot of new teachers offer to become mentors, and it looks like we might have growth this year in our program. And so I'm cautiously optimistic. However, I've just finished sending a sponsorship request to OPG, and they'd previously been quite generous in their support. And I was looking for what I thought would be a substantial portion of the registration fee, $5,000, but I've yet to hear from them, and I do know now that OPG, for their own public relations, may be reluctant to fund a team that could get together and be consequently a COVID risk. So we might lose our sponsorship because of that, and I'm not sure how that's going to go.
Bill, well, first of all, to you and Abir and the rest of the audience, it's very helpful for us to hear stories that each of you are experiencing. first of all, it gives us the lay of the land, what really is the situation out there, and of course how it varies from one school, one team, one board to another. But it does help us plan. And I know that we're going to have some others speak in a minute. I just wanted to jump in and say that I'll do an inquiry to some of my friends at OPG on a more of a neutral level, just to see what the sense is there, and I'll see if I can get back to you on that. No promises, but the fact that the more that we know and that we could help the teams with, the better it's going to be for everyone. So thank you for what you've offered to the conversation so far. And Abir, we fully understand, right now it's January 8th for the 100% refund. There are other partial refunds after that date and so on. And I know that that doesn't fully satisfy, but you don't know, things could change between now and January as far as policies. One example of a policy change that likely is going to happen will be, how does First Canada handle situations for non-vax people due to reasons beyond their control, such as health reasons? So there will be modifications to policies in those types of situations going forward. We just don't know when and where that's going to happen, but for sure, we will be reflective of the Ontario public health policies and the government and what they're dictating to us at that time. What I can say to everybody, and I know that it's difficult for everyone to know what the right situation is for you, but if you're not registered, not committed, but not registered, it's very difficult for the planning on our part as far as how many events do we have to offer you. So it's kind of a bit of a balancing act. So do what you can to try to get registered, and then know that you've got the opportunity to sort of pull the plug or withdraw at a certain time if you have to. And who knows, by then, by the time that January 8th deadline comes, maybe there's some more changes that are in favor of the teams, and we'll see how that plays out. I'd like to pass it off to Roland or whoever else is there that would like to share a little bit of information. William, I can't see the attendees now, so I'm not that sure. I'll leave it up to you to guide that part of the conversation.
Sure.
And after they've all had something to say, I would just like to let everybody know that here's those rare moments to ask me any questions you have.
Excellent. Yes, getting John's attention is difficult. He's quite a busy individual. So we have Roland.
Yeah, I'm sure if you've been around for us for a while, you know who I am. Yeah, so Roland saying lead mentor of 1325. This is now my 11th season with 1325 and 18th season in first overall. Started way back in FLL when my kids were that age, and my oldest is now 31 years old and working mechanical engineer. Came through the program, etc. So anyway, yeah, so we're a community team, so our challenges are a little different than different than the school teams. I mean, our policy was that all of our mentors and members had to be double vaccinated, and that was especially easy to do once First announced their policy. We were kind of a little up in the air about that until that was announced, but that made it easy. So as we've been registering kids, we've been basically telling them they need proof of vaccination. Our biggest challenge, right when the pandemic started, our lease had expired on the area where we were working. So I mean, in that way, it was fortuitous timing because we didn't have to pay for space we weren't using. And we participated last year with the virtual challenges. As I said, we went from about 40 kids to about 16 last year. And then we got our space situation sorted out. One of our sponsors has stepped up and has given us some room to work out of. So we pulled everything out of storage, and we're in the process of setting that up. And we've started taking registrations for the coming season, assuming that we will be we're meeting in person. Our plans are to meet in person, and our plans are to build a robot this year. I think that's what we're all hoping for. Yeah, I mean, outside of you know, if I could get a half a dozen more, if I could get a half a dozen more students on the team, I think I'd be happy. Otherwise, we're trucking along.
Well, that's really great. Thank you so much, Roland, for your insight and yeah, amazing service to first 18 years. That's quite something. There are a few thoughts that come to mind for the teams who are challenged with the COVID regulations. So one, in the earlier days of the pandemic, I was working at a private school here in London, and we hosted several other teams who could not get access to build space in their schools. And they brought their robots over and they were just working at our school. So that's one way that can happen, because the regulations vary across organizations. And our school was quite well set up to host socially distanced teams all in a big area. They were completely isolated. Our teams were not working together. They're in far separate rooms, but they're able to meet. So that's one sort of case in point. Another one that comes to mind with respect to students who cannot show their vaccination status, there are many components of FRC that are now more than ever possible to do online. For example, my team last year was in 3 continents. The students couldn't even make it to Canada, but our coding team was in China, and our media team, social media, video editing, all of that, they were in Nigeria. And then the build team, by necessity, was here because they're the only ones who could get their hands on the robot. And at that, they were limited for some of the season to either 5 or 10 in the room, depending on the month. So with respect to Abir's comments about her team not being able to present some necessary paperwork, perhaps some of the students who are not showing up in person may be interested in our computer programming sessions, which will start 2 weeks from this evening. And on this same call and same time slot, we'll be having computer programming and coding based also on popular demand. According to many reflections in the community, there's a little bit of a need for coding practice. So we'll be happy to host those events, and we cannot check the vaccine status online, or at least we haven't been asked to. And hopefully that will be one way for those students to participate in the meantime. So those are just a few thoughts there. So I don't know if anyone has any comments or suggestions with respect to that. We can open up the floor a little and have some additional questions for John.
William, I did put in the chat to ask people throughout the session if they could just add in the top 3 to 5 hurdles that they're facing, their team, and there could be an array of those. That gives us a better sense of what you're dealing with, and it helps us to better shape how we package what we're going to give out to the community.
Excellent.
And I'll give a few minutes for people to ask questions, and you could tell me how much time I have left, because I have one key thing to ask the teams, a critical question I have for them.
Sure. I don't know if we should proceed through any other of these just slides just to get us speaking about things, or if anyone has any questions now, we can proceed however.
Yes, I have a question about the. I noticed that the registration fee is $7,500 per season per veteran, and what does that cover?
That's basically 2 events. That's your registration for 2 events and a kit of parts and a robot on the kickoff day. And so what is not covered, you'll have to make arrangements to travel to events. And it seems that you're sort of halfway between Georgian and North Bay. So if you sign up quickly enough, you could probably get some close by events. I know that area well because I'm from North Bay originally. And yeah, pretty just, oh, we're almost home.
So William, just on that point, that's a really important point that was mentioned there. So Bill, in your case, Bracebridge, whether it's Georgian you would go to.
Georgian and North Bay are the ones we like to go to. I know that that's what's been happening in the past, and it's also close and reasonable for us.
Mm-hmm. So the question I would presume that teams would be putting in the chat now about hurdles would be permission for overnight excursions. So if that's a major hurdle, which I would assume a lot of the school boards will have that as a problem this year, you'd obviously want to look at an event that you don't have to stay overnight. So that could be Georgian, for example.
Yeah,
Another
Georgia,
one would
yeah.
be North Toronto, say. That maybe is within
North Bay is
you're
easier.
2.5 hours out, right? Oh, it is, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. So then
I've
North Bay, right?
had students. Yeah, we've had well, for Georgian, often we just drive down. We've had drive down and up with kids, and
Okay.
we could just squeak it with North or North Toronto might be better.
Sure.
But
Well,
a lot of our kids are from the north. Like Gravenhurst is further south. I'm Bracebridge, is a little bit more north, and it's not quite. It's North Bay, Toronto.
mhm.
Just we really
Okay.
like North Bay, and we like 1305. But
we know that's a great event. They're all good events. But one thing I will say to everyone, the next 2 weeks, so First Canada Live, just before, like, I think it's the 11th or something like that, there will be an update on FRC, which will have critical information. And you can understand the importance of that, and it's going to be very short. It's just going to be a narrative. Here's an update. And it's going to be like just a few minutes long, but it's days before event selection, which starts on October 14th. So absolutely critical, but keep your eyes and ears to the emails too, because there's going to be a lot of information come out in the next 7 to 14 days from us and from headquarters, which will help you make those key decisions that you have to make. Very, very important. So the one question I have for all of you is this. So this is one of the nice things about coming to mentor sessions, is you get to ask those specific questions, or you get to hear things people haven't heard before. What would be your thoughts? Just your general impression if the events were smaller, because we're trying to keep the numbers down for COVID. So instead of a large 36, 38 team event and all the cramming in, what if it was closer to 24 or something like that, something thereabouts? Do you think that that's a better selling piece for your school boards to get permission? It's easier because you can go there and have less exposure to other people, other teams, for example. And of course, we'd be monitoring our COVID protocols around the amount of attendees for each team that could go to the events and so on. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on smaller events.
I have an opinion. I think that would be great. It shows good judgment. It shows wisdom. Having a very large event can be fun, but at generating buzz by having lots of kids packed together, but that's not really what we're going to go for. And you only need enough teams to compete with one another. You get to see one another more. There are many large events where I don't get to see enough of all of the teams. I think it's a really balanced, reasonable thing to do, to have smaller events.
Thank you, Bill. How about the others? What are your thoughts on the smaller events? I know your thought, Roland.
I think it'll be okay. I would prefer a bigger event, to be honest, just for the competition. But I think a smaller event could work depending on how you structure eliminations. But otherwise, yeah, I think it could work.
Okay, good.
I agree that it might be better. It might affect the board policy, having a smaller event. I just keep thinking about, like, usually for our second and third events, we have to travel 2-3 hours. And so the kids usually stay overnight with some mentors. And so this year, some of the mentors had mentioned that they do not want to go to hotels, knowing that there are people there that are not vaccinated. So they have concerns that way, and we don't have a lot of mentors. And so that's one of the things we're also, thinking about.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. I can say to you this, that before the 14th, you will know the planned status of all the events, the capacities of the events, before you have to make your choices. And you can be sure that these decisions are all made with looking at the criteria and the hurdles that teams are facing with travel, hotels, permissions, excursions, what dictates overnight or not, and how can we make it easier for the teams to participate more. So that's the formula we're working with.
May I make a comment about the idea of having a smaller event. One of the benefits of that, and I'm sure that this wasn't missed on you, is by having fewer teams, there'd be less time to go through a similar amount of competition. And it's possible, I know it's less of an event, and so this is going to disappoint Roland, but to have a later start for those who travel, if you're just going to travel for the day, to make a day trip of it, that becomes a much more possible thing to do. It really takes away from the whole air that I remember and enjoy of it just being a complete robot experience all weekend for the kids. But if we have to get travel and send kids in cars back and forth each night, a smaller event helps facilitate that.
Mhm. And we're looking at both
I'm
sides.
all for a later start if you're traveling to an event. Trust me. I mean, we've done Georgian every year since its inception, and we do it as a day trip from Mississauga. So,
Wow.
so yeah, so it's an hour. It's an hour there and an hour back. It's a long day. I mean, with the bigger team, we'd rent a school bus or whatever, so it was a little easier in terms of logistics. But yeah, it's fun catching a bus at 6 a.m. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're going to start at 8, that'd be wonderful.
You can be sure that the lens we use is one of the teams. What's best for teams? What's going to work best overall for teams? And that's what we're going to go with. So I think once we finalize our details and release them over the next 10 days, you'll be very happy.
So, and it's again really useful. We're getting lots of feedback from the various teams and the various school boards as to what are the key elements to put into any plans, so that we'll be sure to address such details. So one individual was asking about as much detail as disinfection and social distancing and how is it going to be enforced at an event and things like this. So we're getting quite granular and at the same time just putting in place the best possible provisions for a great season. And what could be a very interesting season when it's very small, you get that advantage of getting to spend more time with a few teams rather than a little time with a lot of teams. So we'll see what happens. So thank you. I think maybe we might just go through a few more slides, not to present them, but just to have a few talking points and see if any questions arise. As I'm still mindful of Bill, who's mentioning that he's now taking over the lead mentorship for the first time. So maybe a few points may come up. I'm thinking of my own experience. I didn't know what FIRST was until I signed up. And then I found out, wow, there's a lot I didn't know and it would have been useful. So the next slide here, we already mentioned our coding sessions for students or mentors or anyone who would like to add to their team's coding capabilities. We'll have some introductory and intermediate sessions from October to December. These we're hoping to also invite teams that have some experience and expertise to share it with the others. So if anyone from your team, a student or a coach or a mentor has some coding experience and would like to share, we're most happy to incorporate that. We want to make it a very interactive and rich community. And we've seen that happen before. In London here, we had a lot of that going on between the teams, and it's really great when all the teams support each other. We'll do some more advanced sessions on the coding in January and February. Again, we have set out in the program update, the same email where you got this Zoom link, there's a little link to the session outlined so far, but of course that will change according to what the teams think is most valuable. And we were just discussing the pandemic related contingencies. Right now we're internally referring to 3 plans, A, B, and C, which range from massive rocks, well, not really rock concert, relatively normal events going down to very small and carefully organized events, depending on what is prevailing. And that may be developing even further based on recent consultations. So we will see some announcements, as John said, in the next maybe 1 or 2 weeks. We also have, I know John has been developing a lot of curriculum in the last little while, and we started some sessions last year. I participated in a few, and it was really interesting to see curriculum accumulating, and that might help teachers and schools and teams to make a more coherent approach to the robotics. So a lot of things can get done in class, for example. So those are a few things under the what's new. If there are any questions, please feel free to speak up, as there are only a few of us. I'll just continue. The FRC season in a nutshell. So maybe there are a few things, questions that Bill might have as to how to organize the team. In terms of building capacity among the students, the grant applications and sponsorship outreach. And we've already heard a little bit about that this evening. The landscape has shifted due to the pandemic. Our kickoffs are coming up in January, on January 8th, where there will be the kit of parts and the game reveal. And I think a lot of the things to do in the preseason are referenced back in this calendar here, the FRC calendar. And you will see the key dates. For example, the 14th of October, we're selecting our first event. And the 21st of October, we're selecting our second event. And in that process, at the same time, you're selecting whether or not you're picking up your kit of parts and where you're picking up your kit of parts. Thereafter, there are some signups for first choice, which is a chance to enter a lottery system to get useful parts for your team's robot builds. So for the cost of shipping, you get a bunch of free parts. And there are 2 rounds of first choice, and they're also covered in the calendar. And of course, we come down to the game reveal. Our kickoff events this year are not going to have the quick builds, as there's another plan this year. We will have the game reveal in person in several sites around Ontario, and you can sign up for that. Instead of a quick build on the first day, during the early part of the build season, well, there's going to be something else. And here's something I'm asking John right now. I know in Ontario here, the emphasis on robot in 3 days is not there. I'm wondering about the rest of North America. Are they still doing RI 3D all around? As last year and the year before, we really benefited particularly from several RI 3D efforts.
Robot in 3 days is an optional initiative for people to come involved in. We've had interest over the last 6 years or so in Ontario where individual teams or facilities such as Waterloo have offered to do a robot in 3 days robot and then try to share out their information. So we welcome that across the system again. But as far as our support for initiatives is that we're going to really put the effort towards supporting teams towards the EveryBot so that we can ensure that in this year of, teams have lost 1.5 years of experience across their students on the team. So teams are dealing with grade sort of 11 and 12s that were grade 9s when this all broke loose, this COVID business. And so there's a real lack of experience and hardship that's going to be experienced by teams. So we're hoping we could do whatever we can essentially to try to support our teams with training and walking through different types of programming. And William, I look forward to when you let the audience know about the coding sessions, not just in the fall, but what that looks like during the build season and the importance of basic autonomous so that every team should have some type of autonomous out there.
That's excellent. And just a little bit of detail about the EveryBot. I thought it was a really interesting concept that the Robonauts, the team 118 from Houston, associated with NASA, supported by NASA, every year does a very quick engineering of a basic robot that can compete at the basic level of the competition. They put together a bill of materials that are readily available from such locations as Home Depot and a cut list so that you can come up with some metal or wood or whatever pieces there are, cut, probably metal. And then in a session together at a event that is to be announced in terms of its location on the second weekend after the game reveal, we'll have teams sign up and show up to further develop their team's manufacturing and or build skills and just basic understanding of the engineering behind the robots. So this will be something of a Kickstarter again for many teams to build up skills. It's an optional event. And at the end of that weekend, you will have a basically functional robot and then maybe 5 or 6 more weeks to further develop it, modify it, and see where it goes from there. So that's our plan this year for the FRE bot. The RI3D, especially 2 years ago in my class, the students selected an RI3D from Sherbrooke, Quebec. They couldn't understand a word of the French, and they were ESL students, but they really took to that particular robot and ended up at least inspired by its 3 functions and replicated it in my classes. And it was a really interesting process. So the competition season field trip organization is an issue. So among our contingencies, which we discussed on a previous slide here, A, B, or C, we are looking at for at least one of the contingencies to have the one-day events instead of the 2, as we said. So that might help you with your field trip organizations, as some school boards are not sanctioning overnight trips. So those are a few thoughts for the competition season. The postseason, well, we'll hope to get there. And when we do get there, there are lots of things to think about. And I'm sure we can talk about those in future sessions, reflection and preparing team members for next year and etc. At the moment, I think high on people's minds is just to make sure that signing up is possible and feasible given the current conditions. The key dates, I think this is great. As a lead mentor, you may want to take a look here. And I'm sure we can make this slideshow available in case you would like. This is just a summary of the most important dates from the calendar. I linked the calendar here because this is not all of the dates on the calendar, and there's some more detail. But as a big overview, it is really important, especially if you want to get a particular location, to be ready at noon on the 14th and at noon on the 21st to make sure you sign up for your first and second events respectively, as that will increase your chances of getting there. At the end of October, grant applications are due. That's for rookie teams, and November is payment. And I said here, stay tuned for grants and watch for your invoice. As I understand, there's a slightly different timeline in Canada as opposed to the United States. So I just stated it that way rather than referring everyone to the calendar for this particular item, the payment. And then of course the kickoff is on January 8th. And the big concern is, well, are we going to be able to get students to go there? If you are allowed to do that, there are in-person kickoffs. If not, you're quite fine to just pick up your robot, and there are locations all around and in the various cities of Ontario that will be more or less convenient depending on where you are. So that's a little bit about our calendar. And whoops, am I going the right way? Here we are, a little interactive session on sharing best practices. So this will be another place for us to offer a few thoughts, maybe a few tips for Bill as he's now handling the lead mentor role, a few suggestions for all of us, for Roland, for Bill, for Abir, in terms of recruiting new team members, handling the regulations, and any COVID-related concerns and the like. So the floor is open again, and any comments or any thoughts?
I had a question about the programming particulars. Is it going to be a Robo Rio support likely again, and will there be Robo Rio support for Python, or should we stick with Java?
And that's most interesting you asked that. Our team used Python for about 3 years and we loved it. And it really connected well with my computer science classes. As for official support, I'm not so sure about it. It seems that Python is not going away in general, and there seems to be support for it in FIRST. I'm not sure about this year's support for RoboPy or RobotPy, for example. The sessions that we are doing at the moment, we're planning to do in Java and to support the basic construction of the code in Java. If there is enough interest for Python, I'm very happy to do Python anytime. You can catch me in my free time and I'll do Python.
Well, my concern was the last time I'd used Java, it was the Eclipse environment. I know things have changed since then. What is the new environment that's being used for Java?
We're now at the Microsoft-based one, and why am I blanking on it?
Oh, Visual Studio.
That's it. I used it all the last 2 years, and I just blanked on it.
No worries.
And Visual Studio Code, that's the actual name. And actually, I found it to be, once I got the hang of it, quite smooth for installing and operating. We successfully installed a bunch of libraries in Shenzhen with support from London last year. And so we're able to completely remotely support students to set up and operate and test out their code, even though they weren't here in Canada.
But only from Windows machine. I imagine Linux and Mac don't very much like the Visual Studio.
Actually, both do use it. And I use Linux exclusively. I don't have a Windows machine, and I didn't need to have it.
What about a driver station? Can a driver station be put on Linux?
They're close. You can get a mostly functional driver station. Wow, we'll have to meet for coffee sometime, because it's rare to meet someone who's so passionate.
I've only got a couple machines, and one of them is Linux Mint, and I was just looking the other day to get a driver station on it. My son,
actually,
he's tried it, and he wasn't able to get much success. And he knows for sure that it's not supported by the competitions.
No, but I was successfully able to drive my robot on a Linux Mint in the past, and or Ubuntu. Last year, I don't think we tried, because a lot of the students had Windows, but I'd be very glad to play around with that.
Okay,
so,
sure.
Because that Linux, that's the one little, pièce de résistance is having that available for Linux, because pretty much the rest of my life is all Linux. That was the one challenge I had in the past. But I did download a driver station and have it working in the past. Just, I don't think I did it last year.
Did you use Wine? Is that how you did it?
I think it may have been Wine or a native package like a RPM. No, not an RPM. Sorry, a DEB file that I downloaded and installed. So glad to work with you on that. We can set up time. That's something I've been doing as a hobby for the last 20 years. And I've helped hundreds of people install Linux and get new life out of their computers and do all kinds of things. So anyway, that's a side.
Okay, yeah, I'll be asking. I need help.
Great.
I mean, that's all well and good, but the problem is that I think once you get to competition, if you're doing anything that's not officially supported, and you've got a problem with your robot or your control system, I think you're SOL basically.
The thing is that I've only got one.
Microsoft is now a major sponsor of FIRST, which is why we moved to Visual Studio from Eclipse. And WPI, it's Java or C++, right? I mean, there's not an official supported version for Python yet. Yes, someone's created one, but again, it's not official. And if you run into a control problem with your robot and it can't connect to the field, and they find out that you've written all your code in Python using an unsupported library, it could land you in trouble. So like, be very careful.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm actually from a different planet, because I have 2 laptops that I have access to. All of the school computers are totally locked down for their security. I can't mess with the network cards on them. I have 2 computers. One of them is a nasty old machine with RS-232 ports on the back of it, and it's running Mint. And then I've got the Lenovo laptop that shipped out with the 2018 competition, and it's my prime computer.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm
not in a situation where I've got enough laptops to. I got 2.
We also found, like, we used a Windows computer for our actual drive station, but when we're testing, sometimes we're doing programming on that computer, so we can use another one for drive station. So yeah, it's quite fine. But it is a good point Roland made. We did have a problem in 2018. We had an amazing robot that was able to do 4 cubes on the scale, and it was not working. We didn't know why. And the first thing they told us to do is to reinstall Python or to take Python off and put Java. It turned out that was not the problem. It was actually a piece of metal that had fried our Roborio. So
that's what happens often.
So as a side effect, my star programmer, she learned Java in 24 hours and we were back on the field next day and operating. And the season just got better from there. But anyway, it is a caveat that you just be careful because they didn't want to explore any other options. They just wanted to go for the, let's just try to put the Java back on there.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my number one request for the control system. I mean, it's great that we're all getting a new control system and all new components next year, and it's going to be upgraded, and we'll be able to do lots more with our robots. But Lord have mercy, please support Python officially, because like just about every new kid who comes onto my team who wants to program knows Python, and it says, well, no, it's in Java. Java, really? We back in the 2000s? I mean, come on. So that would be my number one request to WPI is come up with a Python library, please.
Yeah. So well, we'll see where that goes, and I'm sure we can work together to support each other, whichever way it goes. And
question for Roland: are there any posts on Delphi about that?
You know what? I'll be honest. I haven't looked at Delphi in about a year.
Yeah,
because there wasn't much need to last year, and sometimes that's a rabbit hole. You could be on there for hours.
I know, but a key point for everyone too is every year, at Worlds and in our June conference, that's the opportunity for me to take a script of key questions my community wants to know the answers to or wants headquarters to budge on. And that's a face-to-face opportunity to really push hard at headquarters. So what I would say is don't hesitate to say, hey, here's the situation. What can FIRST do about this? And I promise you, we'll take that forward.
And I'll be very glad to send a good word too. I'm a very good Python salesperson. Never been paid, but I'll sell Python anywhere.
Well, I code Python for a living. I mean, I've been doing software development for 36 years. I mean, that's what I do in the real world.
Wow.
And I've been coding Python now for about 7 or 8 years. And I used to be a Java coder. And I'd never go back to Java. I'm sorry, I love Python too much.
Delphi was steering me away from Java. Was steering me away from Python. I went to the Delphi forums, and they were saying, no, stay away from Python because if you go to a competition, you want to speak the language that everyone else speaks.
Yeah, I guess that's the short term. The long term thing. My student started with Python and started a company and became top 30 under 30 Forbes list USA. So Python's where it's at. So most interesting, and we'll see where the Python versus Java discussion goes, and we'll be prepared to support each other one way or another. We have a few resources here that are linked, and many of you probably have already seen them. And then the final thing that we wanted to ask was a little bit about feedback and or suggestions, key topics that we may cover in future sessions. We have one more session planned for next week, where we might get into more detail about one of the topics we discussed this evening. And then we have another session speaking about the plans for the launch and maybe the EveryBot build, and that'll be on the 20th of December. And we can have other sessions planned, or we can respond to any support that you may need. So if you have something you would like to see, you can text us in the chat, you can mention it right now, you can email us, you can phone us. Please feel free to reach out, and that's why we're here, to support the community and the teams to make the best possible season.
One thing that I really liked last year is that we had sessions specific for community teams. And there are more and more community teams in Ontario, especially. I don't know about the rest of Canada, but it would be good to have a few of those again, like this, just to discuss problems that are specific to community teams.
That sounds really good because they are facing some different issues indeed. So that's a really great thing. I've jotted that down and we'll see what we can work in there. So I think that concludes our formal presentation. And please feel free to ask any more questions as and if
you do my fundraising for me.
Oh, is there a magic button? Is there a Python sort of routine for that? There you can web scrape.
A
You
little
scrape a
easy
bank
button.
account.
Oh.
Oh no.
Bill, how open is you? I mean, obviously the schools allowed you to form the team. How open are they to you for you to actually recruit people? Like
The
actually
thing is,
advertise?
it's funny you say that. The TLDSB has made it okay for there to be extracurriculars, and the kids are desperate to do something to be normal. So I've got loads of kids. I can't, like, I have to be really careful because, and the thing is because of the situation where many of the kids are like, there's no requirement for vaccination. We have to be pretty careful about how we run our meetings, and when we'll do it the way we've been doing classes, desks as spaced apart as we can possibly get, and face masks on when we start talking about stuff. But there's no shortage of people who want to participate because they're so desperate just to see things get back to normal.
Yeah. What about in terms of sponsors? Do you have any?
That well, that's just it. One of the parents we do have a parent from before who's a tech for our OPG, and he reminded someone he knows in OPG to send me a letter, and I sent a grant application for that. But I recall from the previous year's grant letters that there was a list. There was IBM and a few other people that had been applied to, and I have no idea how to make applications to any of these other places. And so I really have been left without being passed the book as well as I could. But I don't want to call on my previous mentor because he's in a really serious situation right now, and the last thing he needs is to be thinking about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, start getting your parents involved, like especially if you've got a lot of kids, because like an easy way to get $500 in a lot of cases is if they work for a medium or large size company. In a lot of cases they have a matching grant programs. Like if they if they volunteer for something, then their company will give them $500, right? I mean,
we're going to have our first meeting on Wednesday, so I should be asking, if your parents want to be involved, or if they have a business or want to sponsor, to contact me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the first. That's how I started. I mean, when I first took over 1325, it's the first thing we did was we went after the parents, right? What, who do you work for? What do you do? Can you ask around? Can you get us $500? And some of our best sponsors have come through there.
And you can do other things, like if you have a large team, you could also do something like a silent auction and be the first out of the blocks for new activities as we're emerging from COVID. You never know.
Yeah. This is exactly why I was the thing that exacerbates me is that I've got a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah.
And fundraising activities like that. I know that they're to be done.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking for ways to pass the buck on that particular activity, because fundraising is something I've never been successful at or done well, or I have no skill at it whatsoever.
I know how you feel. I feel the same way. And it is good to call on the parents and see if like 3 or 4 of them want to form a committee and say, okay, they can be responsible for either using A, B, or C method to come up with funds for the team.
Fundraising.
Yeah, it's the fundraising committee. Yeah. And then that it's not only the parents, I think the students should be able to do that. And then they can call in their parents. That'd even be better. So,
yeah. Well, I like that.
Yeah, because then you also can reach out, if you have all robotics type students, maybe reach out to some business style students and say, hey, this is not just for robotics students. We can get some business class students here. Like this could be your project in business class. It's a business plan and it's a fundraising plan.
So the accounting teacher and the business teacher I should be buddying up with to see if I can get some of their best and brightest.
Yeah, and while you go down the hall, you can stop by the arts and the video teacher and get a video made about it. And it can be a very coherent event, and many hands make light work, because I can't imagine having to do that and also do all the coding and the manufacturing and all that other stuff. So make it a community event and present it as something that it's something for everyone, not just the coders and the video game players, it's for everyone. Yeah. Oops.
Oh, there's a calming face.
Bill,
I like seeing John's face.
yeah,
It's calming.
Bill's got that deer in the headlights look right now.
Aye,
Yeah, you know, Bill, I can
Yes.
sympathize with you because like 10 years ago, I was in a similar boat.
same here 5 years ago.
and it's tough at the beginning. I understand, but I mean, what got me through was like leaning on the parents, and I mean, like a parents committee, I think is a great idea. And John
Okay.
will tell you, because we did the same thing with 1241. And
Yeah.
that's how I first got in FRC. Was I was on the parents committee on 1241 when my son went to Hanson,
Nice.
and John was the lead
Oh.
mentor. So
The key piece there is schools and school boards and superintendents and trustees and the like don't say no to parents. So you get the parents committee going, you have them attend your parents council meeting. You have actually more robotics parents there than any other kind of parents, and you're well on your way.
That
oh
is
yeah,
so wise. That is
worked
so
for us.
true, John.
That's
Yeah.
excellent.
That
You
worked for
don't
us
say no
while
to
we were
parents.
still that worked for us while we were a school team still.
Yeah.
You know, before our school closed. I mean, like we had a majority on the parent council. They were all robotics parents. And yeah, even if the principal gave us grief, the parent council would overrule them. It was great.
Oh,
Well, if there's
Oh my God.
if there's no other questions for me, I'm going to jump off. I've got a couple other things to address for meetings tomorrow.
Thank you, John.
Pleasure to see everyone. William, please continue if
Yeah.
the audience would like to do so. Things are going to get better and better and better.
yes.
Just
Especially-
that whole idea of in-person events.
It's
For sure, we hope. But I can tell you this, as I said on First Canada Live, 100% that's how we're planning. There's no in between. So it's all or nothing. So, and right now it's all. I just wanted to leave you with that real positive note. And don't hesitate to reach out to each other. If you have questions, Bill, about anything, whether it's EveryBot, it's the sponsorship piece. And guys, reach out to William about agenda items for the next time, right?
Yeah.
And William, I'm suspecting that you might ask Roland to sign up to deliver a couple of sessions on Python coding.
Oh, that would be excellent. I'll attend those
Oh,
sessions.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right?
not for RoboRio though. Not
No. And by the way, as you know,
basic Python, yes, sure.
Well, exactly. And Roland,
Okay.
maybe if you think about where you think the real niche is for Python in FRC.
Like vision processing.
Yeah.
That's what we
Then
last
maybe you want to do something specific with that,
Yeah,
especially
maybe,
for
maybe that, or
autonomous.
I'll talk to my coding mentor.
There you go. That too.
I'll delegate it.
That's excellent. Also, Beer, feel free to reach out with respect to networking in the London area, because there are several other teams also working, and we can maybe, I don't know if you've been in touch with them, but there may be ways to support each team with whatever it needs to do to get going. So that's good.
We only had a chance to meet with the Thames Valley teams, which was good.
Mhm.
We were discussing the same things we've been talking about today.
Okay,
We sent some questions to our school board and we're still waiting for answers regarding field trip policies and things like
Okay.
that.
that's good. Well, let us know how things are going, and we'll be very glad to do whatever we can, whether you're in Bracebridge or Mississauga or London. Wow.
Well, thank you, William.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure to meet you all. And I think, Roland, you're looking familiar. I must have seen you at least at one competition here or there.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for your team helping us out with the very last event. You remember was the gold, and we were your little team, and so dragging us along.
Oh, okay. See, okay. Yeah, sorry. I
know you don't remember the little teams, but we were
numbers
one
are-
of the little
oh,
teams.
Well, I should. The numbers are a blur. I mean, I'm sorry, but yes, you know what? Because during our recruiting, we've been doing mall recruiting, right? I mean, like we have one of our sponsors is located in Erin Mills Town Center, which is probably the second biggest mall in Mississauga, maybe not the biggest, but the second biggest. And so past couple of weekends, we've been setting up outside there, and we've been replaying that 2020 Georgian video forever. And yeah, that third
Well, the
number was
green shirts,
68
the lime green bright
yeah,
shirts, that's us.
6859. It's the number
Yeah.
on the robot, because like,
That's right.
you know, because we have some of our matches, you know, the one where we had the last second climb where it was 5 seconds to go. And
I know, it was sweet.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
a sweet climb, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and it's been a great privilege to be with you, and hope to see you all in person soon, and if not, online in an upcoming week and mentor session.
All
Thank
right.
you again. Have a good night.
Take care. Thanks, William.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Have a good night
Bye.
and take care.